we could take the roll at your convenience.
Alameda County, Albany, Berkeley, Dublin, Fremont, Hayward,
Here.
Livermore, Piedmont,
Here.
San Leandro,
Present.
Union City, Community Advisory Committee,
Present.
Emeryville,
Here.
and Oakland.
Yep.
Thank you. You have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Yep.
And
And-
I see Alameda County walked in,
And also Fremont.
and Fremont, yes. The entire city of Fremont, entire county of Alameda walked in. So we will take public comment prior to adjourning into closed session. I'm sorry?
There are no speakers for public comment.
Well, we'll just double check. Any public comment of prior to closed session? I see none and hear none. So we're going to go, I'll need a motion to adjourn into closed session.
So moved.
And second, without objection, we're going to adjourn into closed session with our general counsel, but we are going to not actually do anything until our executive director gets here because I think he's needed for the closed session discussion. But we will go in and leisurely adjourn in the next few minutes, and we'll continue the public meeting when we get back out. Thank you.
my other daughter was 14, so this is like her first. I have two. So this is my younger daughter, and she's kind of like, have you texted yet? Text yet? No, nothing yet. Oh man, yeah. Oh, they really do. They really do. How old is she? Let's see. This is. She was born in '86. I think she's going to be 34. Is she going to be 34? Something like that. Yeah. Well, she can't be 34 because 86 now. 33? Must be 33. Old enough that I can't keep track.
Okay. I believe we already had roll call before we adjourned into closed session. And where is our Madam Clerk? A few people came in after we had roll call, but she will note that you're all here. And could I ask Mr. Rue to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. So we had our closed session. And do we have anything to report out of closed session, Madam Attorney? Any final actions to report?
No actions to report tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Now we'll have do we have any general public comment on items that are not on the agenda but relate to EBCE? I don't see any. Okay, so we'll dispense with that, and then we'll move on to our approval of minutes. Oh, did I just see that we got the minutes just like in the email today? Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. Okay, so do people feel they have enough, do people want to approve both those minutes, or do you want to wait? Either way is fine with me. I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Moved by Livermore, yes? No, just the minutes. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, it's part of the consent calendar. Okay, then we were going to, I discussed with Nick in advance, we were going to move the, the PG&E time of use item off consent to non-consent. That's number 9. Okay, and then if anybody has any questions or comments on the rest of the consent calendar, which includes items 6, 7, 8, and 10, or I see no public comment on the consent calendar, is that right? Okay, anybody have any questions on items 6, 8, 9, and 10, the remaining parts of the consent calendar, or want to make any comments? Seeing none, is there a motion for the rest of the consent calendar? Oh, Mr. Pilch.
Yes, I did have a comment. For the legal services approval, would those contracts still come back to us as an informational item under consent? Asking staff.
Yeah, they would on the CEO report when they're approved, but these are contracts that I don't actually think they would come back, right? Because we would have the go into.
So the CEO always lists contracts that he entered into
Yes.
and signed off on the CEO report, and so they could be included on that. But we would be asking you to authorize Nick to execute all of the agreements listed here without individual board hearings for each one.
Right. And that's, I don't have a problem with that, but I would prefer that they do be listed under the CEO report then.
Yeah. So as we execute them, actually, we will include them in the next. If they're between now and the next meeting, if they all occur, then it will be in the CEO report. If they happen after that, they will show up there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion by Director Monroe. And do we have a second? Who was
Second.
Second by Director Hernandez from San Leandro. We have 2 Hernandezes, don't we? Okay. Without objection, I see no abstentions or objections, so that's unanimous. The consent calendar minus item 9. And we'll do, let's do the CEO report first, and then we'll do item 9 after that, or going into that.
Great. All right. So for the CEO report, I have 2 presentations. One is the marketing and outreach update slides. So Annie, will you please give that?
Good evening. So we'll do our standard enrollment, marketing, and outreach slides. I think what I'll do is just skip ahead to some of the account services updates while we wait for the presentation. So we have completed our June enrollment of the second phase of NEM enrollment. The next one will not be until August. We do see basically on par opt-out if you look at the entire NEM or solar customer class. When you look at those that have been enrolled to date, then we do see a slightly higher opt-out rate than our average, but I believe that's pretty standard from the other CCAs. And I might have just messed it up, Stephanie, I apologize. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'll jump back to enrollment. So as previously stated, we're trying to raise this up a level now that we're, pretty far in. We're a year into our service since we launched to our commercial and municipal customers, and we're several months in since our residential customers. I do want to note that I continue to look at each jurisdiction, the participation in our different products, and the opt-out rate. There hasn't been any significant change. So to date, we're still about 544,000 accounts. We're going to see that number fluctuate from month to month as some accounts are terminated, new accounts come online. The actual total cost savings to date is over $6 million, and for 2019 to date, that's 3.5. So by the end of 2019, we expect almost $8 million in savings from those customers that are on our Bright Choice product. And again, our overall opt-out rate by count is about 3.7, a little bit higher by load because of our commercial opt-outs. So I already noted the NEM customers. The other thing I wanted to note, which is in fact on the standard agenda, but I think we can cover it hopefully here, is the rate modification. So the final rates from PG&E, hopefully final for 2019. I don't think there's any more pending, as well as changes to the power charge and difference adjustment were finalized on July 1st and went into effect with PG&E. We therefore updated our rates to maintain the value proposition for the three products. That went into, we went through a process of QA, and the back-end systems were updated just Monday. So this is effective for July 1 for any customer whose billing cycle starts July 1 or after. Those customers whose bill cycle was maybe June 23rd to July 23rd will receive the benefit of the lower rates before that adjustment. But there will not be any customers who receive less than the 1.5% discount for Bright Choice customers. I'm sorry, Stephanie, I messed it up again. Okay, there we go. So from a marketing perspective, I just wanted to highlight some of the press that we received from the approvals from the board for contracts in June. So we had some great coverage by the San Francisco Chronicle, from KCBS Radio, and then from an industry coverage called Green Tech Media. And thank you to those who were able to attend our signing ceremony down at Jack London Square. I think it went really well, and clearly we got some really great press out of it. And that is it for the marketing and account services.
Colleagues, any questions on the marketing update?
I have a couple comments. First of all, we're late to the party, but Livermore's municipal accounts are now the middle Brilliant 100. Also, as a council member, I have been hanging out at our farmers market and seeing you guys marketing, and I'm seeing a lot of people showing up. So, yay! I think it's going well. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Okay, the next part of the report.
Sorry, we have a legislative update. We've had a lot of activity the last couple weeks, so we want to give a quick review.
Right. So you may know that the legislature is now in summer recess, I'm sorry. So I thought it would be a good opportunity to update you on what's been happening in the legislature. First, let's see here. there we go, wildfire legislation. You've probably seen some press on this. Importantly, the Assembly and Senate passed AB 1054 very quickly last week, and on Friday, Governor Newsom signed the bill. So it is now law. Because of its urgency, it was a statute that is considered effective immediately. So it doesn't have to wait until January 1. It does a few key things. There's a lot in this bill. I just thought I'd kind of cover the high-level summary version for you guys. There's a new safety requirements on utilities, including a new wildfire commission, and folks, the utilities have to submit wildfire mitigation plans, which they already had to do. Now they have to do it 3 years out, and the wildfire board will actually have to take a look at that, and that board is made up of experts. So that is some of what the utilities have to do. They have to get an annual safety certification as well. There's some new corporate accountability measures, including tying executive compensation to safety. It also clarifies rules for cost recovery of utility-caused wildfires. It adopts what is called the FERC standard, which is that the utilities' actions are presumed to be prudent unless somebody presents serious doubt. So essentially, if the utility is acting as it seems the utility should, that is considered prudent and entitles them to certain cost recovery. And then importantly, the bill, this is really kind of the central purpose of the bill, it creates either a liquidity fund or an insurance fund. And it gives the investor-owned utilities, except those which are currently in bankruptcy proceedings, the opportunity to decide which fund they want created. So the statute kind of has two provisions, and it's a either or. And the utilities have I think it's 15 days to decide between the two. The liquidity fund would be a smaller amount of funding. The utility doesn't actually have to put funds into that fund. They're able to draw from the fund to pay wildfire claims, and then go through a cost recovery process at the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission. The insurance fund actually does require the utilities to put shareholder funding into the fund. Ratepayers would also pay into the fund. There's an existing charge on customers' bills that was supposed to go away, and this legislation would extend that charge. So that's how that fund is funded. And it's expected that the utilities will opt for the second option, just because it's a much larger amount of money. So for PG&E to have access to the insurance fund and for them to benefit from this new prudency standard, the FERC standard, they have to emerge from bankruptcy by June 30th, 2020 with a plan that has to be approved by the court and PUC, has to be ratepayer neutral, and it has to provide for payment in full to wildfire victims as determined by the court. They also have to prove that they're compliant with the Renewables Portfolio Standard and other state laws. So they have quite a lot that they need to do in order to make themselves eligible for this fund. And then finally, I'm sorry, I haven't been advancing the slides here. There we go. I wanted to note that the mayor of Oakland, Mayor Schaaf, as well as the mayors of San Francisco and San Jose had sent a letter to Governor Newsom prior to the legislation being adopted, expressing some concerns. Particularly, there was some language in the bill that essentially requires the CPUC to approve of certain change in ownership of assets. And the concern is that this could make it harder for municipalization to happen, because now you've inserted the CPUC approval into that process. So just wanted to make you aware of that. You may have seen the letter. Happy to answer any questions. I think this particular provision was put into the law in part to ensure that any workers at PG&E would be entitled to similar compensation and similar number of jobs if there was any transfer of assets. So it was largely kind of labor and jobs related.
Can I ask a question about the provision in the law? Is there anything in the new law that gives the PUC or asks them to create a set of criteria they use to decide whether to say yes or no? No.
So they do have to, so
the previous legislation put forth criteria that has to be in wildfire mitigation plans. And so the CPUC does still have to follow the previous legislation, SB 901. And what this bill does is it extends those wildfire mitigation plans from 1 year to 3 years out.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant the part about whether the part about the change of ownership, the taking over of.
I'd have to look back at the statute, but I don't recall. I'd have to look back at the statutory language. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Is that the legislative update?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
That was the wildfire update. Oops. So just to go through real quick what happened in session with the bills that EBCE has been really actively engaged in. And thank you in advance to those of you who have been engaging with our legislators on behalf of EBCE. Your support has certainly helped. AB 56 was the bill that would have created a statewide central procurement entity. We had a lot of concerns about this because it could prevent us from being able to do the procurement that we want to do. This bill actually failed in committee, so it is no longer in play this session. Having said that, as the legislative cycle is typically, it wouldn't be completely surprising if we saw that some form of this bill come back in another bill and it got an amend later in the session. So we're going to be watching closely for that. We built a strong coalition to oppose this bill, which was really useful. So if necessary, we'll call on that coalition again to help support us. SB 155 is a Bradford bill that had some language in it about requiring the PUC to enforce CCA IRPs. It was really concerning to us because the way it was written, enforcement was very broad, and so you could read it to imagine that the PUC might tell us what time frame to buy which resources, which could potentially lock us into the wrong resources too early on in the process. So we were able to get an amendment from the author on this bill. I would say it was a compromise. It's not perfect, but it was the best that we could get, and the compromise language prevents the PUC from requiring CCAs to buy specific technology or resources. So given that, typically when you oppose unless amend and the author amends, then you move to neutral. So SB 350 was a Hertzberg bill that would have authorized a multi-year central RA mechanism. The language was always fairly vague in this bill, so we were watching this bill. Hertzberg actually asked it to become a 2-year bill. So we'll continue to work through this bill. He's actually committed to working with Garcia. So we might see, if we don't see something later this session, we'll definitely be seeing these themes reemerge next year. SB 520 is a Hertzberg bill that would essentially entrench the IOU as the provider of last resort, or POLR as we often call it, unless the IOU and the CCA and the CPUC all agree otherwise. So we have some concerns about this because the IOU now, the investor-owned utility now has a role to decide whether or not we can become the provider of last resort versus us putting forth our own application on its merits. It could also raise rates for customers because the way the bill's written, the investor-owned utility would receive compensation for performing this provider of last resort role. I would mention today they already perform this role and they don't receive compensation for it, but we do post a bond to assure that if our customers suddenly en masse left and went back to PG&E, PG&E's customers wouldn't be harmed. So we already pay for that bond, we pay the cost of that bond, our customers pay for those costs. This could really increase customer bills. We made all of those arguments in testimony, and it still passed out of committee. So we have some fight still ahead in the Appropriations Committee and probably on the floor. There we go. There we go. So in terms of the support bills, we supported SB 49, Skinner's bill, that would essentially require that energy efficiency standards take into account the reduction in greenhouse gases when you're looking at cost effectiveness. That is currently in Appropriations Committee. So that one's going well. SB 167 is also an Appropriations Committee. That one would require the PUC to include the impacts on medical baseline customers of PG&E's wildfire mitigation plans. So we think this is really important for our medical baseline customers. And it seems to be moving along well. And then similarly, SB 255 is Bradford's bill that would expand CPUC's supplier diversity program to all other load-serving entities, including community choice aggregators, and we support that as well. So that's where we're at with those bills.
Okay, any questions on any of the legislation? Mr. Pilch?
Yeah, just about SB 520. At this time, do you would you still like legislator contact from any of us about that one, and/or letters from cities?
So I think the answer is yes. Give me a little bit of time to kind of come up with our next engagement strategy, and I would be happy to send an email out to the board with specific asks. We're going to be targeting the Appropriations Committee and then potentially the floor afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director Martinez.
So the bill pertaining to the medical baseline customers and protecting them, when would that go into effect? Is that one urgent? Or I'm just wondering, because in light of the power safety shutoff program, and that's a question that I'm sure many of my colleagues are dealing with in our cities, like what happens if PG&E shuts off our power, as they tell us they may do in fire season?
Unfortunately, I don't think this one is considered an urgent bill. It's moving along in the normal track, so it would have to pass the floor by September 13th and be signed into law for a Jan 1 start date. So I think we're going to miss this fire season.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and the next part of the report?
That is the entirety of the report. So.
Okay, and we have no public comment on that item? The executive director report? No. Okay. Okay, so let's go to item 9, the PG&E time of use item, please.
Good evening. So I provide a lengthy report, and I'm going to try and abbreviate it here and then welcome your questions. So for a bit of background, the California Public Utilities Commission mandated that the investor-owned utilities transition customers to a rate structure that focuses more on when energy is used rather than how much is used. We refer to this as time of use, or TOU structure. The rationale here is to save money for customers, but more importantly, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by shifting use to a time when there is more renewable energy available on the grid. PG&E has presented numbers for its service territory that show this kind of new rate structure could result in 10,000 tons of carbon savings. CCAs are not required to move our customers to time of use structures. So we are optional at this point, but I ask you to keep in mind the customer experience, which I think is the most critical point as we talk about this. PG&E will transition both their bundled customers and their delivery-only or unbundled customers in November of 2020 for commercial and May of 2021 for residential customers in Alameda County. I'd like to focus this discussion tonight on residential, but if you have questions about commercial, please do let me know. The current residential time of use structure that is proposed is for peak or more expensive hours from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. every day. Customers can decline to participate in this rate transition, and it will only apply to those customers who are not currently on a time of use structure, because there are several variations that are already available. PG&E has run several pilots, some including other CCA customers, and the main takeaway has been an average decline to transition, meaning people who said, I don't want to be part of this, of about 25 to 30% of their customers. Results from the pilot show an average reduction of use of about 4%. We do anticipate that with this type of rate transition, it takes a while before the behavior really sinks in and people change their behaviors. However, it's important to start moving in that direction. There are pretty substantial marketing campaigns that are already underway to support this effort. So the PUC is funding an $8.5 million statewide campaign in 2 parts. The first part is a vision, or Why Should We Care campaign. Some of you might have already seen this. It's in a lot of BART stations. I've heard it on the radio, on cable television. It's called Keep It Golden, California. The second is a call to action campaign, which will give individuals tips on how to change their behavior. As I stated, that vision campaign already started in Northern California in March of this year. PG&E will further add to these campaigns in their service territory closer to the time of the residential rollout. So what they predict right now is that they'll start an additional campaign in October of 2020 and run that through June of 2021. We are currently, as staff, participating in meetings to remain informed of the progress and provide input. There is additional customer mailers that will go out, and PG&E is responsible for paying for all of this, but they will send these out to our customers whether or not we participate because of the delivery customer component. So they will send notifications at 90 days prior, 60 and 30 days prior, and then a welcome packet once they've transitioned customers onto this new, onto the new rate schedule. We have done some initial analysis about what this kind of rate migration of all of our customers would look like. There are really 2 considerations around the fiscal impact. The first is the cost of what we call bill protection. So this is essentially providing a reimbursement if a customer pays more under this new rate structure than what they would have paid under a tiered rate structure, and they get this bill protection for the first 12 months after the transition. And that is only for residential. Commercial customers are not offered that benefit. The second fiscal impact is reduced revenue. So if we have people doing what we're asking them to do as a state, which is to reduce their use during these peak hours, we will have reduced revenue. Based on a number of assumptions that I've outlined in the staff report, we believe that the cost of bill protection is about $300,000, because there is only a small portion of our customers who, if they just continue the same behavior, will actually pay more. The vast majority will in fact end up saving money. And then the cost of reduced revenues is about $4.8 million based on our current assumptions, which is about a 4.3 reduction from what we would have had in revenues under a tiered structure. There's some other considerations, and these other considerations are partly why we're coming to you so early. That, along with the fact that PG&E has asked us as CCAs collectively to inform them by October of this year, because of all of this marketing that's going out and because of sort of the technical lift. When you think about PG&E is doing this for 16 million customers, and they have to coordinate with 12 different CCAs to make this happen. So some of the other considerations are the costs that we will incur to update our back-end systems. We need to be able to track bill protection for our customers and be able to pay out at various times. There will most likely be an increase to call volume and duration at the call center. I think there is a wonderful advantage to our partnership with SMUD. The SMUD service territory has already undergone this transition. They are already, they've moved their customers to a time of use rate, so they have lots of lessons learned that they'll be able to share with us, and a call center that is very familiar with talking to customers about this kind of shift. There are also various tools in development by PG&E, online tools. They don't precisely reflect any CCA rates. They use PG&E rates as a proxy. Our rates are close enough that that's going to work okay, but again, it's not an exact representation to a customer about what to expect. This is something that CCAs have been pushing to change within the regulatory proceedings. We will 2 last things. We will be reliant on the data from PG&E to accurately track customers' decisions about rate selection. So they're going to be given all this forward notice. If they decline to participate, they can't call us and tell us. They need to call PG&E, and then PG&E needs to pass that information to us. Those types of rate changes are sort of governed by PG&E now. So it's not a change, but when you think about the volume of 500,000 customers, it's definitely a much larger scale, and I just want you to be aware that we'll be relying on PG&E to get that information. Not listed in the report, but again, I mentioned this briefly in the beginning, is the customer experience. This will already be a bit confusing to them to see the messaging coming out from the state, coming out from PG&E, and it could be more confusing if we don't have the same talking points that PG&E is offering. So a couple things on the timeline. We were supposed to discuss this last month and we pushed it. So since then, we have seen a decision come out. There have been a couple changes that I'll highlight in a moment. Again, PG&E is asking us, there's two things they want to know. We can sort of dig deeper into some of the specific policies, but they want to know, will we follow the same 4 to 9 peak periods every day, and will we offer bill protection? They want to know that by October of 2019. I included in the presentation, there was really just one slide I wanted to show you, because the questions I got after presenting this to the executive committee and to the CAC were, well, how do these different sort of variables compare? And so if you think about 4 potential options, either we follow everything, time of use 4 to 9 every day with this bill protection. We follow the hours, but don't offer bill protection. We do a completely different time of use rate structure because 4 to 9 that doesn't really encapsulate the exact peak of customers in Alameda County. That is a representative number for California. So if we wanted to get very precise and narrow that into what we see from our customers, we could do that with bill protection, or we just do nothing at all. We just sort of say, PG&E, we're not participating. The problem with number 4, since I originally created this slide, is that the decision has changed things so that there is a component of time of use on the delivery side for residential customers. Previously, there was no time of use component on the delivery side. It was all generation. So it's really just us. And we thought, well, we don't have to do this at all. But again, there is the greenhouse gas emissions savings, and I think that fits well with what we're trying to do as an agency. So I still think number 4 is kind of not a good option. Number 3 becomes difficult because there is now this time of use component within the rates. The other difficulty of number 3 is that to have our own peak periods means that we have to use our interval data rather than the batched data or billing determinant data that we get from PG&E, and we're just not set up to do that at this time. It would be a pretty substantial lift. We can look to it in the future, but I would not recommend it in this time scale. Number 2, to not offer the bill protection means that our customers would actually have some incentive to go back to PG&E, because if we said, okay, we're going to transition you to this rate, but we're not going to financially protect you, even though we know there's only a small fraction of the people that could actually pay more with that, the perception would be, well, I might have to pay more. So I think there's a big risk of customers going over to PG&E with number 2. So number 1 is our recommendation, that we do follow what PG&E is doing, what the state is doing, that we look to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by incentivizing customers to use energy at times when we have more renewable energy on the grid and less energy when it's more of the brown power, and that we offer the bill protection. It is a fairly small cost, the $300,000 in the grand scheme of things. I think the difficulty there is a cost, and the hours aren't exactly lined up with Alameda, but I think all the other benefits are there. And in my mind, primary number 1 is it will be so confusing if we have different messaging than what is going out across all of Northern California and across surrounding counties. So with that, our recommendation is to do the time of use hours and the bill protection. We will continue to analyze the financial impact. Not all of these rates are finalized yet, and we can, of course, modify our rates slightly within that. So though I'm asking for the decision around following the hours and offering bill protection, we can come back either as a full board or a subcommittee and work on some of the more specific policies that we can implement as part of this.
Thank you. I find that very helpful. Questions, comments, questions? I have a couple of questions. First of all, you list a few other CCAs that apparently have already done this, right? And do we know why there's such a large declining? I guess it's an opt-out, right?
Yeah, we use that decline to transition so that you don't confuse it with opting out of CCA service.
So why that seems like a rather large number of people declining. Are people just perceiving it as something that's going to cost them more money?
That's a great question, and I'm sure they have lengthy reports that have come out of these pilots, and I'm sure it probably really speaks specifically to that. But what we did see was what happened within a PG&E bundled customer population and what happened within the CCAs was consistent. So it wasn't a matter of CCA customers decline this, but standard PG&E customers don't. It was consistent across the population. I do think that probably speaks to good customer communication, that 25 to 30% of the population actually realized this was happening and took action. Whether or not they're going to see a benefit from that, I think, moving towards a time of use structure is the right thing to do.
Yeah. Okay. And did the bill protection, either with PG&E or with the other CCAs that have already started this, did that actually, was there a comparison or a control group, or did the bill protection lead to people not declining that would otherwise decline, or what value do we as a CCA get from having bill protection?
So I think the value one is apples to apples comparison with what PG&E is offering. So we don't get sort of playing against each other. Well, if I go to PG&E, I get this. If I stay with you, I don't. So it just makes it consistent. I don't believe within the pilots, to participate in the pilot, you had to offer the bill protection. So there was no control group to say what happens when we don't offer it. From what I've heard from PG&E staff, they often compare this rate migration to the introduction of smart meters, where it's something that happens to every single customer, and you have a certain population that does not like that. And so they feel that the bill protection sort of softens that blow of here's a mandatory change that we're bringing to you. And I will say much like enrollment with a CCA, lack of action means that this thing happens, but you can decline to participate, and our customers would have that option as well.
Okay, and my final question, and maybe others have questions. The first thing I noticed in this chart was the hours match Alameda County, and there's an X. That stood out right away. It seems like the whole purpose of this is to maximize greenhouse gas emission reductions, right? So that suggests to me that's not maximizing that. So
it's maximizing, but it's still improving. So the 4 to 9, and I should say this was a very preliminary analysis where I simply looked at where is our peak load, not necessarily where is our peak cost or where is our peak amount of brown power. And so those things, if we were really being particular, we would incorporate all of those into the analysis. When I looked at it just from a peak load perspective, it was maybe 5 to 10 rather than 4 to 9. But it was, I felt in presenting this comfortable enough to say, I think we're enough aligned that we will see an environmental benefit from this shift.
I would not doubt that at all. I think there'll be a substantial benefit, but just not the maximum possible benefit.
Correct.
And so I think the way you presented it was staff's recommending this with the understanding that X number of years down the road, we may be able to have the capacity to create our own.
Correct.
The best time frame to maximize our environmental benefit, and I hope we eventually do that. But we understand what the ask is.
We don't lose that opportunity.
Right. Okay, Director Pilch and then Director Mendel.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been the beneficiary actually of a time of use plan for about 4 years because I have plug-in vehicles, and so the rate is quite cheap in the middle of the night. And we kind of geek out about it. I kind of like the load shifting. I can go on and on about that, but I won't. So my question is about rate plans, though. So we do offer already, because we offer the same rate plans that PG&E does, we offer some time of use plans already that our customers can take advantage of. But you mentioned that in order to well, first of all, two questions. Do customers then now have to call PG&E to change their rate plan, even though if there are customers? And did you say that if they want to opt out, they have to call PG&E as well? So I guess that'd be two questions to start with. Yeah.
Yes, so PG&E is what I would refer to as the authoritative source on a customer's rate schedule. And so as a customer, you could either log in on pgne.com and change your rate schedule. They then send that information to us through a data transaction. And to decline participation in this, we could perhaps facilitate through a link on our website, but it would have to process through PG&E and then be sent to us through that same data transaction.
Okay, that's interesting. It seems like that could, definitely cause customer confusion, and that we're not part of we can't be a full part of the process either.
No.
Interesting. Also, I'm generally in favor of staff's recommendation. It is kind of interesting that it's not a very great differential between the peak and non-peak. So I'm kind of intrigued also of us considering doing something different down the road, something a little bit more meaningful. But anyway, generally in favor. Thank you.
Okay, Director Mandel.
So thank you. I'll move the staff recommendation for the time of use rate from 4 to 9 with bill protection. If there's a second, I'll have a comment.
Second.
Thank you. So my comment is a little off topic, but it's related. So it was interesting to me that 25% opt out of this rate transition. It suggests to me that people are paying enough attention that a large number of them see something that they're a little uncomfortable with and are choosing to opt out, which relates to our own the opt-out process for EBCE in general. At 3.7%, whatever it is, you sort of wonder how many people were actually paying attention. Guaranteed at least 25% of them were, and chose us, right? So I think that's a good sign that we are much more popular than this particular rate structure, which won't cost people any money. So it's an indication that it's not that people are just sort of lucking into this or accidentally falling into it. They're choosing us. Thank you.
One more question. Do people know that whether they allow this to happen or choose to decline, the meter outside their house is going to be the same meter? Because some people, a few years ago, when these meters were being installed, had all these, oh my gosh, we're going to be irradiated and blah, blah, blah. And so people realize that choose or not, you still got the same meter, it's already done. Do people know that?
So those people who declined a smart meter are not eligible to participate in the rate default or rate migration. We need to have 12 months of interval data in order so I should say PG&E's requirements state that as handed down to them from the PUC. And I suggest we follow that. I have examples of the notifications that were sent out as part of the pilot, and in fact, we're meeting with the PG&E team tomorrow to review those in the context of EBCE. I don't recall if that was specified, but if I will make a point to look for that and get back to you.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion and a second on the table. And yes, Director Hernandez.
Just to understand the recap of the presentation, in regards to those who are doing the rate protection, it's basically those people who are continuing that quote-unquote bad behavior, not shifting if they opt into the program, and they'll see the increase in the rate. They'll want to opt out because it really changed their behavior, but you still see a small percentage of that. That's how I understand that.
Yes, so the idea of the bill protection is so that those people don't opt out, that they stay on the rate they learn during that first year without any financial impact. And then they realize how to shift their behavior so that they don't have the financial impact in the second year.
So in order to get the bill protection, they don't necessarily have to opt out. They don't opt out.
No,
Okay,
they participate in the new rate, but at the end of the year, you do an analysis and compare based on their usage. what they paid under the time of use structure and what they would have paid under a tiered structure. And if they ended up paying more with time of use, we pay that differential.
So you don't have to opt out to get that bill protection. You can still
No.
get it, but sort of that first
If you
year
opt-
learn and go.
Yeah, if you opt out, you just stay on that tiered rate.
And so maybe that 25% opt-out is maybe because of the brand of PG&E is so poor right now. Maybe the people don't want to associate with any change. So I think for the messaging and the branding, let's be very specific about the value, sort of downplay the PG&E's role. It might be important. In regards to your findings from the 5 to 10 hour for our peak load, if we're able to find a way to incentivize people to go to that 9 to 10, improve our value proposition, maybe like you get a bonus if you really lower that. I don't know, but how the messaging could play if we grow that 5 to 10 window or that 9 to 10, there might be an opportunity. And I think it's important to also speak to how you're going to redirect people. Maybe if they go to our website and then maybe help them to redirect there. Because I think that website, the Energy California website, I think points you right away to PG&E, and then it doesn't really give us any information about us. Sort of seems like it's a dead end right now. So it's going to be important to partner with them on that messaging or sort of helping them create that path forward.
Absolutely. I mean, we will need a robust communications plan. We are not slated for our residential customers to participate in this transition till May of 2021. So we have time to develop web resources and other educational and informational tools. But I agree. I noticed that on the Energy Upgrade California, it says enter your zip code and here's your provider. And there are no CCAs listed because this was a PUC funded endeavor. And they don't oversee CCAs. But it is certainly, there is a working group. It's a marketing, education, and outreach working group associated with this time of use effort. And CCAs have really within the last 6 months or so come to the table, been invited to come to the table and participate in those discussions. So it's been pointed out.
The closer that we can update that section, it's like website under construction. It feels like it, like, okay, site under construction, people go to it, there's nothing there. The faster we can close that loop or help them inform them, be better. I mean, within the next 3 to 6 months would be ideal. The more exposure this information goes out there to the community. Thank you.
Okay. Scott, Director Haggerty?
Thank you. I'm just kind of curious how we can vote on this because we're still in the CEO's report and this really wasn't properly noticed. I mean,
No, this was actually after the CEO report. This was an item taken off the consent agenda. Item number 9.
oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So we have a motion and thank you. We have a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Seeing none, that adopted unanimously. Thank you very much for all the work you guys put into that. And we'll move on to the next item. We have no speakers at all for any of the items today, is that right? Okay. Thank you for being here. Okay. And next item, the Community Advisory Committee report. Welcome our new chair, Mary Sutter from the Community Advisory Committee. Great to have you here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. I have 3 things to share with you, and he stole my thunder on the first one. We held our elections on Monday, and I am the new chair of the Community Advisory Committee, and Jane Franch is the new vice chair for us. So just for myself, I'm a partner in a small company based out of Oakland that specializes in energy research and energy efficiency evaluation. Jane is their strategic sourcing and sustainability director at NUMI Organic Tea. So she's kind of, she's the person really representing a lot of the business side for us. So we're both really excited to begin our new role. The second thing is we learned more about the EBC legislative strategy from Melissa on Monday and really enjoyed learning that. Wanted to share with you that we did hear from other members of the public, not specifically CAC members, but they were concerned about the recent wildfire legislation. So I think everybody's kind of aware of that. Lastly, we discussed and we are putting forth a recommendation that the EBCE go beyond the Treasurer's report that's already included each quarter. In fact, I think you have the Treasurer's report in today's agenda, and begin providing quarterly unaudited financial budget information, kind of similar to how some of the other CCAs provide this information. We're willing to work with staff as needed if the EBCE board feels this new reporting is a useful addition. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of our new CAC chair? Okay. That last item, maybe we could bring that to the executive committee, Nick, and discuss it at an upcoming executive committee? Okay, great. Okay, let's move on to SMUD.
So this is a presentation from Tracy Carlson, who leads Community Energy Services at SMUD and is the executive sponsor of our working relationship. So Tracy, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Tracy Carlson, the Director of Community Energy Services at SMUD. I just have a 10-minute presentation for you, and I'll answer any questions that you have. I just am hitting up. Technical difficulties. Really. Oh, perfect. I promise I'm just pressing the up arrow. Sorry. Thank you. Who is SMUD? We're Sacramento Municipal Utility District. We are the 6th largest publicly owned not-for-profit electric utility in the nation, and we've been in business for more than 7 years. We have a 7-member publicly elected board and a mission that closely aligns to community choice aggregation with local control, renewable energy, greenhouse gas reduction, customer choice, and price stability leading that. We're also committed to our customer and community. As Annie mentioned earlier, we've transitioned our customers to a time of day pricing. That's the name that we've chosen. And less than 0.1% have chosen the standard rate option, or excuse me, the fixed rate option. So more than 99% of our customers have transitioned to time of day. And we continue to receive reviews through J.D. Power and brand trust across the nation. Community Energy Services is a department at SMUD that was established in 2017 to serve community choice aggregators. We offer core services with East Bay being our largest client today, billing and data management, wholesale energy, business operations, and contact center. We also provide services to Valley Clean Energy, and we've recently launched a relationship with Silicon Valley Clean Energy to do program design and development on their behalf. So we entered into contract with East Bay February of 2018, quickly diving in to build our processes, procedures, working very closely with the entire EBCE staff and PG&E to establish policies and procedures. Then launching into the non-residential customers of more than 50,000 in April, beginning business in June. Again, launching into enrollment for less than 500,000 customers residential in September, all the while maintaining that business operations, working closely with the East Bay staff. And we're currently, as Annie also mentioned, enrolling your net energy metering customers. Those will be completed by the end of the year. So billing and data management, getting it right is imperative. Our commitment is to deliver an accurate bill to each of your customers at the end of every month. And in order to do that, we have to exchange data, massive amounts of data, on a daily basis with PG&E. There are more than 9 data exchange and points throughout the system that we validate data and receive data from PG&E. And what that means for an organization of your size is that we can process as many as 32,000 bills in one day on your behalf. You'll notice in the graph in the upper right-hand corner, we documented or wanted to share with you, for the sake of transparency, the exception process. So we, of course, want to have 100% of the bills go out with no problems. We have about a 0.6% exception rate today, and early on in the process, it was a little bit higher, in the 1% and 2% range. So what does that mean? When you have an exception, what does that look like? Customer data can come across with usage data missing the customer account information, or it can come across with account information missing usage. We have to then partner with your staff as well as PG&E to get both pieces of the puzzle in order to process the bill inside of the 10-day billing window. So there's a close relationship with the EBCE operations staff, the SMUD operations staff, and then again validating with PG&E. We have to develop a robust quality assurance process. We have many steps that we QA throughout the process on bill presentment, as well as all the way through post-bill presentment. I'm not going to give away my secret sauce, but I will tell you that there's many steps we have built in here to deliver on that 0.5% exception rate, and we have confidence that we're delivering accurate bills for your customers. Next slide. So East Bay is a pioneer in the space of data management. Your team has chosen to utilize interval data to build your custom daily load profile. I won't get into too much of the technical detail, but highlighted here on the graph shows the value you receive from identifying your own custom daily load profile versus using the average PG&E load profile that they provide for you. This has a positive impact to your bottom line, and again, something that your data management team and Taj, working with Howard, are really a pioneer in the space. Next slide, thank you. So customer communication. Our call center is here for you Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. We have 16 unionized employees that support this work. We manage email, phone calls, voicemails, and IVR. But that's not the only channel customers want to communicate in. They reach out to your team via social media, in person, letters. Again, this kind of highlights the communication and the collaboration that we have with your teams. There's many handoffs. We may ask questions of them. They may ask questions of us on a daily basis. So by the numbers, digging in a little bit deeper, as we mentioned, more than 547,000 customers. You were the largest residential enrollment for CCA that PG&E had ever experienced. It was a heavy lift, to say the least. I think the SMUD and East Bay team did a fantastic job migrating that. We also have processed more than 4 million bills on your behalf and collected more than $405 million. We've taken more than 21,000 phone calls, 1,500 emails, 500 customer callbacks, and 1,000 customer saves. I'll share with you a little more detail in 2 slides on that one. So phone calls and emails, you really can't tell when a customer is going to call you. You can't schedule that. You have to be there when they need you. So this is a lot of data, but if you just look at it from a high level, customers decide, and there's variability within call volume and interactions. We're here to support you, and whether they call 40 times or 340 times, we're here. In addition to how long the customers want to call, some customers have very quick interactions with us. We have handle times in the 2 and 3 minute range. We also have calls that are over an hour, where customers really want to know, what is the value of East Bay? What information can you share with me? Who are you and why? We're here to do all of the above. And metrics. We're delivering specific metrics to your team. We have an average speed of answer commitment of less than 60 seconds. Right now, customers are waiting on average 15 seconds to reach a CSR. And we have an abandon rate commitment of less than 3%, which means while they're waiting, less than 1% is disconnecting. And again, the average handle time is 9 minutes and 49 seconds. Takes that low of 2 minutes and that high of an hour and averages it out. This is a map of the customer saves. So when a customer calls in and very clearly says, I do not want to be part of East Bay, our staff takes that very seriously. They understand and are committed to the value of East Bay and the value they provide to the customers. They share with the customers, the value, and this represents all customers that have come onto the line saying they want to opt out, and the 1,000 customers that we've been able to say, no, really, you don't want to. Here's why. And they've chosen to stay with East Bay. What are they saying? Customers are saying they're excited. They hope that EBCE will be successful. They appreciate our ability to explain the detailed charges, and they appreciate the energy efficiency tips that we're giving them. I think SMUD is a utility service provider ourselves, so we know what good customer service looks like when it comes to engaging with a utility customer, and I think this is great evidence of that. They appreciate our patience and professionalism, and again, being so thorough. So as you anticipate your time of use pricing, we're here to support those conversations, however detailed they become, especially when you're talking about net energy metering and time of use pricing. Can get pretty interesting. Next slide. Again, this is just a slide kind of highlighting that we are prepared to speak to time of use. We're comfortable with that. We've also already experienced a public safety power shutoff for one of our other clients and dealt with calls related to that. It was over the weekend and pretty short interaction, so nothing too dramatic, but those types of calls are interesting because it's new to customers. They've been anticipating it, and it can be can place them in a disadvantage. So the SMUD customer service reps are trained and prepared to speak to those types of complex, unique utility challenges. And here's a portion of our team. These are the CSRs and the billing agents that support you every day, so I appreciate you giving me a chance to share a little bit about us.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions, comments?
I'm curious.
Director Mandel.
Go back to the saves page. I was sort of curious that, Hayward's percentage of the saves was much higher than our percentage of the customers overall. And I was wondering if you had any idea why.
Great question. I really don't have an idea why. That's just 23% of the 1,000 are Hayward. It could be that there's a larger volume of customers. I really don't have a good answer for you.
Do your call takers, do you have bilingual speakers, multiple languages supported?
Yes, absolutely. We have both Spanish and English customer service representatives. We also have a language line service that supports more than 150 languages.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and this is an informational report. We appreciate your work very much. Staff, any other comments on this?
No comment.
Okay, so thank you again for your work. Appreciate it very much, and tell everybody we appreciate what they're doing. And let's move on to the next item. That's the treasurer's report.
Yep. There's no presentation for this. So item 14 is an informational item on the treasurer's report. It is a report of EBC's cash position that we do on a quarterly basis. So this is all information for the quarter end June 30th, 2019. We've maintained a positive cash balance on all of our EBC bank accounts, which are all held with River City Bank. We have listed in the memo all of our different bank accounts. I will highlight the three largest accounts there. So the operating fund, as of June 30th, 2019, had a balance of $26,730,701. Our lockbox account, which includes a $5 million reserve on top of this balance, was at a balance of $10,929,728. And then the operating reserve fund was at $17,237,906. So I'll just highlight those three sort of largest balance accounts. In terms of cash received into the lockbox, and all of our revenues as they're dispersed from PG&E first flow into our lockbox. So this is representative of the revenues that are coming in each month. So April 2019, we had $31,813,179. May 2019, you can see fairly consistent, but a little bit higher at $33,554,692. And then most recently in June 2019, a further uptick there to $35,713,404. So in total, in that last quarter of the fiscal year, we had just over $100 million of cash coming in. In terms of outstanding loan balance, we currently have our Barclays credit facility. The loan balance is outstanding at $12,512,500. We do anticipate repaying that debt in short order. We'll have another discussion item following this one regarding our credit facility specifically, which I'll talk in a little bit more detail about that. Our collateral and customer prepayments, so we're currently holding $600,000 of collateral from counterparties that we're having negotiations with regarding our PPAs. The next section is on customer delinquency. This section always has a little bit more of a lag relative to the rest of the report. So this information is as of May 31st, 2019. And again, that's just due to sort of the reconciliation process associated with tracking delinquencies and information that we get both from PG&E and SMUD through this process. As you can see here, we track a 30 to 60 day, a 60 to 90 day, and then a 90 plus day delinquency levels. And the 30 to 60 day is just a little bit less than $2 million. The 60 to 90 day delinquency is about $1.2 million. And then the 90 plus day delinquency is about $1.7 million. We at this stage have not gone through any collection process. Typically the delinquencies tend to still over time get resolved to some extent. At some stage as we hit some material levels and lengthier delinquencies, we may come to the board with some policies to try to address some of that. Other highlights I'll just touch on, as I've already sort of noted a little bit, but the Barclays credit facility, we intend to amend that. So that's the following item actually on the board agenda to discuss that process. But currently we have, we've begun repaying outstanding principal on the Barclays facility of just shy of $600,000 per month. And that assumes repayment in full by March 15th, 2021, which is the expiration of the credit facility itself. But as noted, we do anticipate accelerating that debt repayment schedule in full in 2019 and probably in the very short term. And then currently, the Barclays collateral account is partially funded at this stage. It's funded at $2 million, and that reduces interest payments that we have outstanding on that principal amount. Lastly, of note, we have kicked off our annual fiscal year audit process. This is covering fiscal years 2018 through 2019, and we anticipate that to be completed in the October timeframe. And that is it for the Treasurer's report.
Okay, great. We have no public comment. Director Mandel, question?
Yeah, just a brief comment. So I appreciate the report, but I want to echo our CAC chair's comments about the importance of providing more robust financial reporting as we move forward. And I thank the chair for referring that to the executive committee. And it would be my hope that by the end of this year, we have sort of a more robust budgeting policy in place that provides some guidelines, whether it be quarterly reports, the multi-year budgeting to the extent that that is possible, understanding that's a challenge, but to have some guidelines in place for the board's expectations so that starting in 2020, we can be sort of implementing that. That's my hope, and I hope that the conversation will allow for that sort of a larger discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Others, comments, questions? I have one question. So on the customer delinquency, is there a way for us to know what percentage of these customers would be in some kind of low income status?
I think there is. I don't have those stats with me prepared today, so I can take that as an action to sort of better understand sort of the breakdown.
Yeah, when you do the next quarter, this comes quarterly or every month?
That's a quarterly.
Yeah, so it'd be nice to know what percentage of each of these categories are, the best we could tell, low income of whatever metric we use. And then what our plan is to go after the ones who aren't low income. I mean, that's my off the cuff thought. In terms of collections. I mean, theoretically, we could go after all of them, but my informal thought personally is let's go after the ones who are not low income. What the hell they think they're doing? You know, they owe us money. So anyway, if there's some thought about staff to figure out a plan or eventually get to a plan to get that money, that'd be great. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Dr. Sanders.
In regards to the delinquency, I had the question, is that, and I know we have the SMUD representative here, is that an offering they have for collections or follow-ups with the accounts? I'm just curious if that's a service offering that they could or would provide in the future, since we have that relationship and they have a basis with their customer base. So since the representative's here, maybe they can do that.
Maybe I'll ask Tracy to respond to that question.
So the short answer is certainly. The long answer is you don't always have the data needed for proper collections techniques. So when you think of customer identifiable information, social security numbers, driver's license, that sort of thing, it's not the type of information you may have or want to use in that way. So yes, but how is certainly something to discuss as a team.
And I think there's a clear action here to sort of explore our sort of strategy and, potential tactics towards that, and ultimately what is the policy that we want to have approval from with the board. So we'll take that back and understand that what limiting factors there are on that information, come to the board with some recommendation on that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and I'm very supportive of getting those quarterly reports, P&L, as the CSE chair suggested. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's information report. We don't here vote to accept information reports like we do with my city council, do we? We don't need to do that. Okay. All right. Next item, please, and that's our revolving credit agreement. right?
Yep. So item 15 is an action item. For item 15, we are seeking approval to adopt a resolution that approves an amendment and restatement of our current revolving credit facility with Barclays Bank PLC and authorize the CEO to execute this amendment. The amendment would allow for issuance of letters of credit as well as reduce the interest cost of the current facility. Just a really quick recap, the existing credit facility was approved by the board in February of 2018, so about a year and a half ago. And in that approval, through that approval, we signed a $50 million credit facility with Barclays that was effective through March 15th, 2021, so a 3-year credit facility. After our successful launch and starting to build up a balance sheet, we've been able to negotiate a more favorable rate, as well as an option to issue letters of credit. So let me detail some of the changes that are proposed through the amended agreement. The first is that the borrowing rate, which is currently at 1-month LIBOR plus 5.25% for uncollateralized draws, would be reduced to 1-month LIBOR plus 2.5%. So it would be a reduction of that cost at 2.75%. The undrawn fee, so what's not drawn with the facility, was previously 1%, and that would be reduced to 0.95%. The credit facility size would remain at $50 million, and then we would include 2 sublimits, a $30 million sublimit for the issuance of letters of credit and a $25 million sublimit for cash draws. And you'll notice that adds up to over $50 million, but the aggregate draw amount or issuance amount would not exceed $50 million. So it just gives us a little bit of flexibility as to how we allocate across those 2 purposes. The LC cost is at a rate of 1.75%. If an LC is issued and it is drawn upon and we do not immediately reimburse that draw, the interest charges on that would be the same as a cash draw, so 1-month LIBOR plus 2.5%. The operating reserve fund requirement, which is currently $17,100,000, would be reduced to $7 million, so a little over $10 million reduction in that operating reserve fund requirement. The one thing that we lose out of the new facility is an option to actually collateralize against borrowings. And in our prior agreement, when we collateralized, we brought down our interest rate. But because our uncollateralized rate is being brought down so substantially, we're actually removing that as an option. The last thing is that the term of the loan facility itself would remain in effect through March 15, 2021. However, the letter of credit facility would actually have a longer tenor that would go through July 2024, which would in essence be a 5-year letter of credit facility. That's a fairly customary duration for letters of credit, since as you post letters of credit as collateral, counterparties really want to see that there's some duration there, since those are typically automatically extended if they're not canceled. So if you had a shorter duration facility, it wouldn't be quite as effective in issuing. As it's required by law, we'll summarize sort of the fiscal impact, a couple scenarios, and sort of the maximum potential costs associated with the amended facility. In terms of the borrowing rate, which comes down from LIBOR plus 5.25% to LIBOR plus 2.5%, for every $1 million that's borrowed in cash against the facility, that means the savings would equate to $27,500 per year in interest and commitment costs. For every $1 million issued as a letter of credit on the facility, EBC would incur a cost of $17,500 per year. So that's the 1.75% annually. As already noted, the interest costs per annum are 1.75% for letters of credit. The borrowing rate for draws are LIBOR plus 2.5%, and the commitment fee is 0.95%. We're estimating up to $100,000, which would cover all sort of counsel fees associated with the amendment, recording any documents that are necessary as a debt facility, and any future LC issuance fees, so sort of administrative costs. And again, maximum proceeds of the facility are $50 million. Of course, the actual balance can fluctuate from time to time over the duration of the facility. Then there's 2 sort of cost scenarios I'll detail to wrap this up. One is sort of a maximum cost scenario, and then one is sort of a rough projection of a more moderate use of the facility. So if we were to fully draw on the $50 million credit facility through March of 2021, and then beyond that, issue the maximum letter of credit amount, which is $30 million, that's the sublimit, and also draw on that and not reimburse it through July of 2024, our total interest and finance charges associated with those draws would be $5,671,000. That's based on a 1-month LIBOR assumption of 2.73%. If you were to include the principal repayment in that amount, it would total $60,671,000. So that's just intended to be a summary of the potential maximum charges that could be incurred through the facility if we were to maximize the draws. That is not what staff anticipates. Based off of more moderate usage, if we had an average loan balance of $10 million in cash through March of 2021, and then issued letters of credit at also a $10 million level, and then drew on that and didn't reimburse that through July of 2024, those total interest and finance charges would total $3,270,000 over the life. Again, assuming the same LIBOR of 2.37%. So again, if you assume the $20 million of principal repayment there, then the total would be $23,270,000. I know there's a lot of numbers, but wanted to summarize all this cost, certainly as it pertains to sort of the changes in the interest rates.
Thank you. Any questions or colleagues or comments on this, colleagues? Okay, seeing none, this is an action item?
Yes.
Okay, so I need a motion to adopt as recommended.
I'll move the item.
And okay, moved by Director Pilch and seconded by Director Dutra-Bonacci. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Seeing none, that's adopted unanimously of all those present. And thank you for your work, staff, on this. It looks like we're going to save some money here. Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is something.
Item 16, which is the EBC rate modification. This is an informational item. Annie covered this item in her presentation in the CEO report. This is an information item, so no action is needed. So might I suggest that we move on from this to item 17, which is our last item, and it is an action item.
Okay, without objection, we'll move on to item 17.
So item 17 is an action item for 3 contracts. Howard?
Can we get the presentation? I got it up here. Great. So for item 17, we have 3 contracts that we're bringing forward to the board for approval, 2 out of the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative and 1 out of our California Renewable Energy RFP. We've presented this summary of the 2 RFPs now, I think on a number of occasions. The Oakland Clean Energy Initiative and the California Renewable Energy RFP were both issued in June of 2018. The OCEI was a joint initiative with PG&E to help enable the shutdown of the natural gas peaker plant in Jack London Square. And for the California Renewable Energy RFP, we went out and solicited new California-based renewable energy projects and received a robust number of proposals with a minimum target of 20 megawatts in Alameda County. I'll provide a summary of the 3 contracts that we're bringing forward here for approval. First, though, I want to present this slide before getting into the project details, which is in response to some questions and inquiries that came from the board through our prior board meetings related to these long-term contracts. So this is a slide that we did previously show in a slightly different form. It is a summary of analysis that we had completed by our consultant, Edison Energy. And basically, through their analysis, they ran a robust number of scenarios that represented basically all the combination of projects that you could possibly have through our, that represent the projects that we had sort of shortlisted. And so through that analysis, what they showed was the top ranked portfolio, which is shown here in sort of this light green color all the way to the right. And then they also showed a bottom-ranked portfolio, which is the red coloring there all the way to the left. And so this is intended to give you a range of potential financial outcomes if you selected either the top portfolio or the sort of worst economic portfolio in those histograms. The line all the way to the right, this sort of dark greenish line, represents the sort of median scenario of all of those scenarios. So it's your sort of P50 as they refer to it as. And the red line towards the left represents the median outcome for the worst sort of economic portfolio. Then we've overlaid basically the portfolio that we are recommending to the board, both those contracts that we've brought forth previously, what we have tonight, and then a couple contracts that we anticipate bringing forward in September. And that's sort of this kind of teal aqua color, if you will, which is fairly close to the top ranked portfolio, not exactly equivalent because we made certain decisions related to development risk, counterparty execution, project location, Alameda County, et cetera, that still make it a very strong portfolio, but not exactly representative of the top-ranked economic portfolio. So that is all, those are all elements that we had previously presented. The addition here is we included a portfolio that is representative of Alameda County utility scale projects. So looking at offers that we had received, aggregating them, and then scaling the size of that portfolio to be equivalent to what we're sort of looking at otherwise, we wanted to show the economic impact if we only went out and sought Alameda County projects through this analysis.
I think one thing that's important to note here also is that this is not the totality of Alameda County projects. These are only Alameda County projects above 20 megawatts.
Right.
So certainly there are smaller scale projects in Alameda County that will be considerably more expensive. These are projects that are 20 megawatts, 30, 40, 50 megawatts, so large scale, of which there is quite limited overall supply. The other thing I think it's important to note is just when you're looking at the cost, that's $4 million a month, or negative $4 million a month. So that is a negative annual cash flow of almost $50 million.
And we provided this information. There was questions around what is the differential, what is the premium that we pay for an Alameda County project. We don't want to disclose that on an individual project basis, which is why we sort of aggregated it in this manner to try to represent what that sort of premium cost is. I will move on now to the projects that we're seeking approval on. So we have 2 projects out of the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative and 1 project out of the California Renewable Energy RFP. We are seeking approval for a 13-year, 7-megawatt local Greater Bay Area resource adequacy contract with ES Volta. And that's a project that is intended to come online in December of 2021. That is an approval we're seeking to execute a negotiated contract. And then we are seeking a approval for a 10-year, 500 kW, so half a megawatt local Greater Bay Area RA contract with Sunrun. That's a really exciting proposal that we'll talk about in more detail, but it's an aggregation of behind-the-meter solar and storage units that will be installed on low-income housing. So despite it being small, it's one of the most exciting proposals I think we've seen and that we're putting forward on the board. And that is an approval to complete negotiations with that counterparty, as there are some rules that are continuing to be developed with CAISO and so need to be incorporated into that contract prior to execution. So it's an approval to complete negotiations and execute that contract. And then lastly, there's a 15-year, 112-megawatt solar power purchase agreement with Clearway Energy Group that we're seeking approval on. There is a revision to the resolution that we put forth to the board that we'd like to make to this. The prior version sought approval to execute an agreement that was already presented. There is a provision in there that was brought to our attention that needs some some additional negotiations and discussions with the counterparty. And so we'd like to revise that so that it is an approval to complete negotiations and execute that contract. And so we would ask the board clerk to revise that and subsequently get that resolution signed. In addition to the PPA there, important to highlight is we are in conjunction with that PPA signing an exclusivity agreement in the form of a right of first refusal contract with that counterparty Clearway for a 43 megawatt Alameda County wind project. That is a project that is in earlier stages of development, not quite ready to be contracted, and so we've negotiated with them to have that under exclusivity as we move forward with both projects potentially. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about each counterparty and each project, starting with the ES Volta RA project. Again, this was selected through the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative. It's a 7 megawatt standalone in front of the meter battery storage project. It's a 4-hour duration, so it totals 28 megawatt hours. This one is a 13-year contract, and it's expected to come online in December of 2021. Its delivery point is Oakland Substation L. This is a critical location for this project to be located. It meets specific transmission needs in downtown Oakland that will help support the closure of the peaker plant. This is, it's worth noting, one of the riskier projects that we have, at least relative to other storage projects that we've looked at, because it is still undergoing the interconnection process. There has been substantive evaluation and studies that have been completed, but there's still some work that needs to be finalized before the counterparty will know exactly what those final costs and timing of any necessary upgrades and such will be. But due to the location of where it is, it was staff's recommendation to move forward with this project to ensure that the peaker plant can come offline. This one, like our previously approved project Vistra, is a contingent contract, so it will require PG&E approval as well as CPUC approval in order to move forward with it. And then lastly, the contracting entity name here is Tierra Robles Energy Storage, LLC. The counterparty is a developer and owner specifically of utility scale energy storage projects. They've got about 522 megawatt hours of storage projects either in operations or contracted, and they have worked with all three of the California IOUs in the past. They're headquartered in Aliso Viejo, California. They have all of their internal approvals necessary to move forward on the project on their end. They are a subsidiary or have received investments from strategic investments from Powin Energy Corporation and an entity called Blue Sky Alternative Investments. And lastly, I would say that the organization, the company, and through this agreement, they have committed to utilizing union labor and to the extent practicable, local labor as well. The next project I'll speak to is Sunrun. This is a project, again, we're really excited by. This is selected through the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative. This is an aggregation of multiple solar and storage behind-the-meter installations that will be made at low-income residential houses or multi-family units. And the way that this RA will be provided is through something called proxy demand response. And proxy demand response is, quite frankly, it's a product that's still being somewhat developed, and the rules are sort of under development with CAISO. And so there is some risk to highlight with this particular proposal, but given its underlying benefits of addressing certain needs of the low-income segment, the fact that it's a behind-the-meter configuration, it's obviously in county. We're really excited to bring this forward, and we think staff has, believes this is sort of worth the risk in terms of undergoing this proposal, kind of working through the CAISO rules and regulations to ensure that proxy demand response is something that can meet resource adequacy obligations that load serving entities have. I think this is sort of a first of its kind type of a project. It's worth noting that this was originally intended to be a contingent contract with PG&E. Due to certain factors, PG&E has elected not to move forward with it. And so EBCE, we've been able to figure out a way to continue working with Sunrun on an individual contract basis and continue moving forward with it. So we're really excited that we were able to kind of work that through. It is worth noting that originally all of the installations for this project were intended to be in downtown Oakland to meet the specific OCEI need. Because of PG&E dropping out and us needing to move forward, we've allowed for the flexibility to have Sunrun do installations more broadly in Alameda County so that it's not strictly constrained to Oakland, since the need here won't specifically meet necessarily the reliability obligations as is associated with the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative. Again, I'll note that for this one, because there are some rules and parameters to be incorporated in the contract, we're seeking approval to complete negotiations and finalize the contract and then execute it. A bit about Sunrun. It's a company that was founded and is headquartered in San Francisco. They've been a leader in the residential installation space since 2007. They're a public company and have more than 233,000 customers and over 1.6 gigawatts of residential solar installed throughout the country in 23 states. In 2007, Sunrun expanded its offering to include battery storage, and right now is a leading residential grid service provider. They've committed to install 100 megawatts of solar on affordable multifamily housing in California over the next 10 years. Lastly, they've committed to incorporating prevailing wage labor in their contracts. The last contract that I want to highlight here is a 112 megawatt PPA contract with Clearway Energy Group. This is a portion of a 192 megawatt project that they are building. The project is called Rosamond Solar and is located in Southern California in Kern County. What's unique about this project is that it's a PG&E DLAP hub settled location. If you'll recall, we have one other contract that is done in this format, which is the contract with Solar Frontier Americas, which is also a PG&E DLAP hub settled location. This is very favorable in terms of managing our basis risk, which typical projects would be settled at the P node, which has significantly greater sort of pricing exposure to the market. The commercial operation date is expected to be March 2021 in this case. Estimated production is over 300,000 megawatt hours of energy annually. This is a fairly mature project. The interconnection agreement signed, site control is secured, and construction is expected to begin in early 2020. Because this project is located outside of Alameda County, Clearway has committed to investing into EBCE's Community Investment Fund, as many of the other non-Alameda County-based project developers have as well. The contracting entity here is an LLC called Golden Fields Solar 3. And like all of our other projects, Clearway is also committing to utilize union labor and prevailing wages. As I noted before, what's really exciting about this project is that we've been able to negotiate an exclusivity agreement for another Alameda County-based wind project. It's a project called Reclaimed Wind. That exclusivity is going to be provided in a structure called a right of first refusal, where when the project is mature enough to bring forward, they will propose an offer to us and we'll undergo negotiations at that time. Clearway Energy Group is made up of the former Energy Renewables platform. So as that unit was spun out of that prior organization, it was rebranded and renamed to Clearway Energy Group. So it is an organization that's been around for some time. They have 4.1 gigawatts of projects in operations, over 9 gigawatts in development, and have done both solar and wind assets. They've got a large office in San Francisco, so are fairly locally based, and over 600 employees overall. Lastly, Clearway is owned by Global Infrastructure Partners. That was the entity that purchased the Energy Renewables platform and have over $51 billion in assets under management. I will stop there. The next steps are really, some of this, I apologize, a couple of these bullets are a little outdated, but really next steps are to continue with our IRP process. So we'll look at our longer term planning beyond sort of this stage of procurements as we go forward in the coming months and quarters. So I'll just highlight that. And lastly of note is I do anticipate bringing forward 1 to 2 additional projects in September, which would complete the California Renewable Energy RFP. I anticipate those projects will be based in Southern California. And with the contracts that I brought forward, that we're bringing forward today as it relates to the Oakland Clean Energy Initiative, that should close out that RFP.
Thank you. Appreciate the detailed presentation. So we have 3 contracts and we need approval on this. No public speakers. Do we have any questions or comments among the board? Director Hernandez and then Director Pilch.
Thank you very much. I just want to appreciate my thanks to staff, specifically Howard, and then there to sort of clarify and give me sort of the lay of the land, some of the contracts. I think there was some work done before in regards to the orientation of the contract status, so I appreciate the time there to debrief me a little bit more on the contracts and that visibility, some of the details. So I just want to thank you for that time. I'm excited about the Sunrun project. It looks like we can maybe apply it to more opportunity sites through Alameda County. I'm just wondering about the flexibility of those locations with Sunrun. What does that look like? Do you have specific projects, or should we bring attention to Sunrun about potential low-income multifamily projects out in the Alameda County?
Yeah, so they are going to be sourcing these projects. I would think that, certainly if there are specific sites that are of interest, they can be passed along, but I think in this case they really are kind of leading that effort, and so we're not going to be particularly engaged, I expect, in the sourcing of sites. I think as we think about this model in the future, there's going to be quite a bit of opportunity to have more involvement in the specific siting and kind of identify sites that we can bring forward.
Yeah, I just think about two projects in San Leandro. We have about 200 homes that were built by Bridge Housing, all affordable, another 62 that are scheduled by Eden Housing, two prominent nonprofit developers looking at the low-income affordable housing route. So it could be a good partnership there and throughout the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pilch.
So just thank you for the detailed presentation. Just a quick question for the battery projects. What kind of batteries are there? Do they use lithium-ion, or is it something else?
That's right. They're intending to use lithium-ion batteries. They're a strategic investment with Powin Energy, so they intend to use Powin sort of energy systems for that installation, and it is lithium-ion is the expectation. That is the same with the Vistra project as well.
Okay, thank you.
Director Sutter?
Great, thank you. So Howard came and did the same presentation to the CAC on Monday, and we really enthusiastically support the two Alameda-based procurements. These clearly demonstrated to the CAC that EBCE staff is working hard to set new standards for innovation and best practices in this energy transition. Specifically, we commend them for the right of first refusal agreement for local wind, the behind-the-meter aggregation of solar and storage for low-income buildings, and the inclusion of project labor agreements, prevailing wages, and local hire. So the CAC really like these.
How do you really feel? Okay, thank you very much. I see no other comments or questions.
If I can move it.
We have a motion by Director Hernandez from San Leandro.
Second.
Second by Director Mandel. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any objections or abstentions? Seeing none, that's unanimous for all those present. And if I need to sign something, I will sign whatever I need to sign. It's on. Okay, it's over here. Okay, and do we have? Okay, so our next item is announcements, board member announcements, staff announcements, impeachment announcements, whatever announcements you have. We'd like to hear them. Who has any announcements? Yes.
Before you move on, I want to clarify that the motion you just made was with the minor revision to the authorization that Howard noted in his presentation.
Yes, understood.
I believe that's already included in the documentation. I think I saw that
Oh, excellent.
change
Okay, I just want to
already
make
there.
sure that we all know that was included. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, announcements. Nick?
I have a question related, not an announcement, a question about scheduling. So we obviously don't have any meetings planned for August. At our executive committee meeting next week, one of the items that we're going to bring forward is some continued discussion about our power content. That is a continuation of some of the dialogue that we had in the context of the budget. And so the question is, we were going to have that discussion at the executive committee. Is there an interest in meeting in either August or at that first meeting, that first Wednesday in September, or waiting until our third Wednesday in September to have an informational item for the whole board on kind of power content and the evolution of our power content over time?
Director Mandel and then Director Pilch.
So I think that conversation is going to take a couple meetings, and I would rather start it sooner rather than later, and I would much prefer the August date, the third Wednesday in August, to the September one, personally.
Director Pilch?
I'm fine going either way, but I just wondered, is there an urgency to presenting the, or any deadlines, any timelines coming up that we would want to get the information sooner than later?
We have no specific deadline that we're facing on this topic.
Okay, no urgency. Scott Giver? Director Haggerty?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, Board of Supervisors, you know, we get one vacation a year, and that's August. And I know that a lot of the cities go dark, so I don't know why we're trying to pick August. And it's the one time I can get away, unless I miss board meetings, which I haven't done in 22 and a half years. So I would prefer we not meet in August.
Okay.
If we do, later in August would be best.
Okay.
I think it's a question. There's no specific urgency to meet in August. We can wait until our September, third Wednesday in September to have an informational discussion. It really is just more of a question to the group, so we can, if there was an interest in meeting earlier, we obviously need to take some steps to plan for it. But if the preference is not to, then no planning is required.
I don't see any overwhelming desire, given that there isn't any urgency, time sensitivity. So I think it's okay to have this as part of our September meeting. And let's go from there. We could discuss it more at the next executive committee meeting, but I think there's no urgency to have it in August. Okay, any other announcements by board members about anything happening?
I will be away the September 18 meeting, traveling to DC for another conference. Thank you.
So we should eat.
Yes, you should eat and have snacks, please. Thank you.
Okay. I will also just note that I've asked Councilmember Mandel to be the new chair of the executive committee. The composition of the executive committee will remain the same, which will include the chair, the vice chair. Now we have an immediate past president, immediate past chair for the first time. So that person will routinely, in my opinion, be on the executive committee, my desire. So chair, vice chair, the immediate past chair will all be in the executive committee. And then we'll have Director Mandel be the chair of the executive committee, and one other person that will continue for the next year be Mayor Arguin. And then after that, we could switch things out after this next year. So and that's next Friday at 11 or noon? 11. Next Friday at 11. Okay. Yes.
President, has the composition of the executive committee changed?
No, not. It will not be changing for the time being.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and no other announcements. This meeting is adjourned.